Joel,
Hello, how you doing, Joe?
what is going on? How you doing?
I'm doing quite well. Excellent. Good to see
Good.
you.
Good. Nice to meet you. Where you located?
I'm actually just down the road from you. I'm in Olathe right
Oh,
now.
right on. Okay,
Yeah,
cool. Very
so we're
cool.
just here in Kansas City, local.
I like it. Yeah, it's always rare on this platform to run into anybody local. So I'm always like, oh my God, I can't believe it's happening.
I
So
know, right? Yeah.
yeah. Well, man, it's great to run into you. Thank you for taking a minute out today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on. I'm really excited. So,
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to begin our conversation with living through the last 3.5 years or so, the heavy of going through a pandemic. How did you get through it and how did it change you?
oh gosh. Well, I mean, that's the subject really of the whole book that I've put out there, is that whole quarantine experience and what had happened during that initial lockdown period. And I think for me, what really helped me get through the pandemic was a lot of mindful meditation, sort of having that space really to turn the volume down on all of life's activities and kind of go inward for a bit and really allow myself to think deep.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is you've been all over the world, and I'm curious
Mhm.
if you were to be put in front of a bunch of grade schoolers, it's third graders, let's say, it's career
Yeah.
day, and they want to know
Mhm.
what you do for a living, how would you answer them?
You know, what I tell people now, as I'm sort of in a transition period myself, is that really my goal is to help people navigate their world with mindful intention. So whether that's through educational systems, which is what I've most recently been working with, or just helping people physically navigate the world through travel, or through motivation and inspiration, sort of my main goal really is to just help people navigate their world with some focus and purpose.
So, what did you want to be when you were a kid in the third grade?
Oh, I wanted to be an explorer, Indiana Jones.
Well, you've actually done that. So I'm curious, are you originally from the Kansas City area?
I am, yeah, born and
Oh,
raised from here,
okay.
but have spent the last 20 years living abroad now, and have only recently been relocated back here to the States due to conflict overseas.
So what were the seeds that were put into you? What was your childhood like? What made you want to explore and go out? I mean, there's all these vignettes of working in vineyards in Italy and being a flight attendant in London. How did all of these curiosities become who you are today?
Well, I ascribe that to two different influences, really. The first is my mother. My mother, basically, when she was growing up, she tells the story when she was a kid in Chicago growing up that her neighbor's mother all the time would be like, Linda, why do you just have to go somewhere? Always doing something, hopping on your bike and going down to watch the highway being built or going down to the corner drugstore to pick up a soda or whatever. She's always going someplace. And I think it's sort of genetic, really, just this desire to go someplace new. The second influence I really ascribe that to is actually when I was in primary school, we had a presenter who would come every year and give talks on geography, different destinations that he'd been to every year. The guy's name was Randy Nadler. And he just sparked a curiosity for global travel and exploration. And so, ever since my grade school days, I wanted to go and see the places that he had seen, and I wanted to always just explore and discover something new, like my mother was always doing. So, two big influences for me.
So what was the first big trip you took that maybe gave you butterflies, but made you feel comfortable with, hey, this is what I want to do?
So first time I ever really went abroad would have been my junior year of high school, and I did a 3 week exchange program to France. And I remember finding that experience to be both incredibly challenging, but also exhilarating. I remember flying across, the Atlantic Ocean. Ended up living with host families for 3 weeks and sort of experiencing French culture and life and food, and it was all so different. And my French at the time was very limited, and so it was kind of, frustrating to have to navigate all of this. But I just loved the challenge of it. I loved the opportunity to learn something new, explore something new, to sort of push myself outside the comfort zone and to really grow as a result of it. And I think I was hooked ever since then. I had to go overseas again.
So of all the places you've been to, what was the most surprisingly magical place that you were at that you didn't expect it was going to be like that?
Oh, Iraq,
Wow.
100%. Yeah. When I first moved over there in 2016, I went, sort of given a contract thinking I might leave after 2 weeks. I'm like, hey, ISIS was still active at the time, and I flew in, and I remember changing planes. I was flying from London through Istanbul to Iraq, and I remember the first leg of the flight, two cosmopolitan international cities, London and Istanbul. Flights were fully international. You had people from everywhere, Nigeria and Japan and Brazil, all on these flights. And the second flight, I changed planes and went from Istanbul to Iraq, and it was all I was in the Kurdish region. It was all Kurdish, and I was the only Westerner on this plane. And I thought, what have I got myself into? But I ended up staying. I was there for 7 years and found it was just incredibly magical to be in the cradle of civilization, to be surrounded by Mesopotamian culture, the birthplace of writing and language and culture, and have all these historical places and those biblical stories that you grew up with, or all these sorts of things that are just around you that you could just explore. And it was amazing. It just absolutely blew my mind.
So what explorer that we learned about in grade school fascinated you the most? Who did you admire the most?
Ooh. I don't know that I have a really steady question answer to that question. I mean, I just remember growing up being fascinated by, the Spanish conquistadors who would come and explore, North America. And I remember Magellan sailing around the world. I think, maybe Magellan, that one kind of sticks in my head is like just he went everywhere, went around, circumnavigated the globe, and it was just this sort of amazing accomplishment for his day. Yeah,
Yeah.
anybody who's been where they didn't think they could go
Yeah.
will draw
You
my
know,
attention.
I think about this too. I spent a lot of time in my 20s traveling. I went to Italy
Mhm.
and went to Europe and really studied or went around the United States. But I always found that Kansas City was a good springboard. It's right in the middle of the country. It's easy to get out of. What
Yeah.
is the allure for Kansas City for you staying here?
At this season of my life, it really is family.
Yeah.
I have older parents that are in the region, a younger brother with nieces and nephews. It kind of brings me just back to my roots. And honestly, I think that's been kind of at this season of my life, one of my main principles to pursue is to just stay in touch with my roots, with my origins, because once you spend a lifetime traveling, you find out that sort of home is everywhere and nowhere, because you've always kind of moved from place to place and set down roots in different places and made homes. And I have always said that home is where you are known, but there is something about coming back to that first root, that first base where you were born and raised, that I think is just the season of my life where I need to be here for this particular time.
The one thing that travel's done for my brain living in Kansas City is that I always feel like there's little things that happen here that feel like other cities. For instance, that
Mhm.
revolving sushi thing down on the plaza now at
Oh
Cura.
yeah,
I
yeah.
don't feel like I'm in Kansas City. I feel like I'm in like maybe Hong Kong, maybe LA, little
Hmm.
bit maybe Greenwich Village. It just doesn't feel
Hmm.
like there's something about getting in there. And I think that's the thing that's cool about Kansas City going to other places. This
Hmm.
town's really been built up. I mean, we're going to get the World Cup. I mean,
I know, right? That's incredible. I
what
mean, I think
that
Kansas City is way more cosmopolitan than people originally thought it was years ago. I mean, it's
yeah.
totally had a boom season. So,
Yeah. I mean, even I went down to the NFL draft and I was just going to do that experience thing. But
mhm,
my wife and I went down and we got kind of shuttled into the front of the stage and got to see the last pick.
mhm.
And I just could not believe what I was watching. I mean, there was media everywhere. They totally redid the whole thing. There's bands on stage. Everybody's happy. And I'm like, walking up to it felt like I was in Chicago. There's vendors everywhere. I'm like, when did Kansas City become this? So it's kind of fun to see the transformation and the maturity into what we used to be as the Paris of the Plains.
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
No, I think Paris is the plan. That's a great. I've never actually never heard that phrase before for Kansas City, but I find that's pretty accurate.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of
Well,
art and culture here.
absolutely. I think it's surprising. I have a jazz radio show, and that's kind of where
Mhm,
that term came from. And it is I did hear a stat when the pandemic began because of Pendergast and us having booze for that time period. We were the longest running city that had live entertainment going of any city in the world. So when everything shut down, we were literally on the books as the one that stayed open when other cities had to close down.
Oh wow.
Isn't
Yeah, I
that
didn't know
cool?
that.
So
Yeah.
it's one of those fascinating things. Um, So I'm curious, with you having such a level of adventure in you,
Mhm.
who's been a hero for you in your life?
Oh man, a hero for me. That's a question that a lot of people ask, and I've never really had anybody that I sort of say, this is the person that I really look up to and I admire and I want to emulate.
Yeah.
I think I've always kind of wanted to just forge my own path and be my own person. And, the hero is, inside of me and my own journey and what I'm sort of uncovering and discovering as I go through life. Definitely a lot of people influence that multifaceted aspects of my personality of people who I think, I want to take this from them and learn this from this person and, be of service to this person over here. But in terms of one particular hero, I don't know. It's all in here somewhere, I think.
Yeah. Well, how about this? If you can meet anybody alive on the planet right now and spend some time with them, someone that you find fascinating, who would that be?
Alive on the planet right now. Uh, you know, Again, one thing that I've always sort of thought about this question is I would love to meet, I honestly can't remember the guy's name. He was one of the nightly news broadcasters when I was growing up in the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah.
And I remember just like he was there at Tiananmen Square and the fall of the Berlin Wall and like all these historical monumental events and was reporting live, from all these places. And I think that someone like that would be super fascinating to just sit down and have dinner with and be like, wow, you've seen these big momentous moments of our current history. Tell us what it was like to be there, to report live from the scenes. Someone like that I think would really fascinate me.
Yeah, my day job is as a IT technician for a school district, and our
Mhm.
PR person that was here for a while was a reporter. And I said, "What was the one story that you covered that was just mind-blowing?" And he flew to Columbine after it happened.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And the weird thing was that in the school that I was at when this happened, I don't we were covering some event that had nothing to do with any heart-pounding tragedy. It was just some event.
Mhm.
There was a counselor in that school that was actually a student at Columbine, which is wild, you know.
Yeah.
So, but when you said that, I was thinking about Ted Koppel. I saw the Elvis movie,
Yes.
and Ted's awesome. So I watched the Elvis movie, and I just kind of got into a rabbit hole, and I watched an interview with the Colonel, and Ted Koppel did it, and he was
Mhm.
so democratic about the way that he was kind of painting him into a corner about, hey, do you think maybe you impeded Elvis's evolution, and
Hmm.
just things like that, just the way Ted would do things. I've
Yeah.
always admired him. I've always
Yeah.
admired Tom Brokaw and all that. But yeah, they definitely have a front seat to history for sure.
Yeah. Those people, I think, I mean, they'd be great dinner guests.
Yeah,
Like that's just.
yeah. So let me ask you this. If you could get into a time machine and go back and be a reporter and cover and be in front of one event in human history, where would you go? What would you love to have been in front of?
Oh man, what would I love to be in front of? I think the sort of archaeologist Indiana Jones, sort of the little kid in me would want to go way back and like, let's go see, the invention of writing. Let's go back to, ancient Sumeria and like the Tower of Babel and ziggurat building. And, like a part of me, that's obviously like long before news reporting kind of thing, but
Yeah,
just, ancient deep history I think really intrigues me on that front, and just we know so little other than sort of the remnants that have remained, that are here now.
yeah,
It's so hard to piece together that history, and so I'd love to go way back in deep time and see what was like.
yeah. So what is the motivation for you every day? I mean, you wrote a book, you
Mhm.
travel, you explore. What is that motivation every day for you to get up and to explore the world and to evolve as a person?
Um, I think I really just see in the world there's a lot of opportunity for people to learn and to grow and to help one another and to be of service. One area of passion for me right now is really the global refugee crisis and migration. As part of my experience during the pandemic, being quarantined in Greece for 5 months, sort of accidentally, here I am, a man from the West who is trying to get back to my home in Iraq and Middle East. And I had accidentally been caught in Greece there for 5 months. And at the same time, I met all of these refugees from the Middle East that were caught in Greece trying to get to the West. And so our paths intersected. I ended up volunteering to teach English in the refugee camp there. And I think that whole experience really opened my eyes to the global refugee crisis. 1% of the world's population is displaced due to conflict right now,
Wow.
which is a significant amount of people. And if you compare that with, the 1% wealthiest in the world that, hold the billions of dollars, if there's a way that you could make those two intersect in some way, shape, or form, there'd be loads of solutions to, global issues that we could, address. And so I think for me, it's right now one of my big motivations is to see what I can do to be of service to the world, to get a message out there, to broaden people's perspectives and horizons, and understand some of these deeper issues that are going on.
So you had mentioned mindfulness, and I'm curious as we've come out of this pandemic, do you see that we're entering some level of enlightenment as humans? I mean, we had George Floyd that happened. We had all of these social issues that kind of happen on the forefront. Do you see us coming out of it, maybe entering a new age? I mean, because when after the Spanish flu, the 20s came around, it
Mhm.
was a time of flourishing culture. Things really started changing. There was a happiness, there was a revival. Do you see that humans are entering some level of enlightenment now?
I would hope so on some level. And yet I also just, I hear our news headlines and I see our
Mm,
current situation in this country being so fractured and, polarized that it's really hard to see the silver lining
yeah.
sometimes when the current headlines just seem so bleak. Um, so I don't know that I really know where we're going as a society, other than I know that, as individuals, we can make a difference, and that if we can make it our mission to contribute whatever we can in some way, shape, or form, that we will make a difference and move this world forward. So I think part of my mission really to wake up in the morning is to help other people see that. Like you can make a difference, even a little one. Just go out and do it.
So, of all of the things that you've done and seen and become in your life, what are you the proudest of?
Wow. I think I'm really just most proud of my ability to connect with people from all walks of life. From the refugees in the camp that I had worked at to um, the school I worked at most recently had some of the wealthiest kids in the region. They were, nieces and nephews and, grandkids of the leadership and the prime minister of, the Kurdistan region. So we've, being able to connect across the whole spectrum of socioeconomic wealth and culture, I think has really just given me this rich tapestry to be able to, uh, to serve so many different people from all walks.
You know what? Another thing that's interesting about, local facts and especially Olathe specifically is that there's a significant amount of Sudanese. There's a
Hmm.
big Sudanese community that exists in Olathe. I remember
Hmm.
years ago the basketball player Manute Bol, I think he was 7'7", just didn't even look like a real human. He
Yeah.
he lived there and he did a lot of relief work, and
Hmm.
unfortunately, I think he got malaria, he got something,
Oh
and
gosh.
and it was fast, and he passed. But I remember that was the thing. There was a strong community of Sudanese that existed in Olathe, and I always wondered why.
Yeah. So part of the, with global migration, we got a lot of Sudanese, there's quite a few Algerians. Kansas City in general is home to a huge immigrant population, really way more diverse than people think Kansas City is. And I think a lot of what happens in the global migration patterns is you have someone who's sort of on the vanguard of settlement. You've brought in a family from Sudan. They've had some program through Catholic Charities or Jewish Vocational Services
Yeah.
or whichever organization brought them over. And once you have one family settled, then many others will come to join to be nearer to their own sort of ethnic communities. So do tend to be, groupings across the country for various, ethnicities that all kind of go up in one place. So I don't know what brought the Sudanese here to begin
Yeah.
with, but there's quite a few.
Yeah. I'm always interested in things like that. So when you were growing up, what was the book that you read as a writer? What was the book that you read that really opened up the portal for you to want to read more or eventually write or give you this fascination for exploring?
Hmm. Well, not so much when I was a kid, but more as an adult. One of my favorite books ever is The Kite Runner by Khaled Hosseini.
Yeah.
And just the magic of that story of a life transformation, of redemption through this main character, all set in the backdrop of the conflict in Afghanistan, and that transition to the United States and sort of the life that he develops here as a character. Um, and just the writing so strong, so such a powerful moving story. That's one book that made me laugh out loud, cry on the next page. At one point I was so angry I threw the book across the room and couldn't read it for 2 days. I mean, it really pulled on my emotional heartstrings on all levels, and so for me that really inspired me to want to try and do something along similar lines, see what I could do to create.
I just now reserved it. It's Khalid Hosseini. Is that it?
Yeah, Khalid Hosseini.
Okay,
Yeah.
Hosseini. Yeah, it's interesting. I'm looking forward to that. Yeah, I'm actually reading one. One of my guilty pleasures is going to the Dollar Tree and all the books that never really
Mhm.
sell well. They usually are really good reads. And this one is 99 Nights. And look, all right, it's probably all blotched up,
Oh,
but
there we are. Yeah.
it's interesting because it's talking kind of about the modern culture of Afghanistan, things that we don't
Okay.
realize about
Yeah.
kids growing up and all of those things. And I think from what you've experienced in your life, I
Mhm.
think it would deepen our sense of empathy and humanity if people did understand what's going on in culture aside from war headlines. You know what I'm saying?
Totally, 100%. I think intercultural understanding is such a huge piece of what we need to be doing in our world. Helping people not just highlight those differences, but to understand the values that drive some of those differences and then search for the cultural universals that tie us all together. Because regardless of where you go in the world, you're going to find people that want to have a healthy, prosperous family, that want to respect their own community and help it grow, that want to pursue, a life of happiness and joy and fulfillment. And how that looks ends up being different from place to place,
Yeah.
and how you achieve that. But everybody has these same sorts of goals. And so for me, living in these places, particularly in the Middle East, which has such a polarized sort of opposite dialectic, conversation to what we have here in North America, I think has really opened my eyes to look for those patterns and to see how can we connect across those lines. Because once you do that, you do develop that empathy, you do develop that understanding, and find you have so much more in common than you ever thought you did.
Yeah, for sure. So at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you, your family, your friends, your readers,
Mhm.
but you're running the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Constantly evolving, growing, changing, always looking for something new and learning. Um, I think that's me. Me in a nutshell.
Yeah.
I will always need a challenge and look for the next one. Um, yeah.
So if anyone wants to pick up your book, see any travel logs, learn more about you, anything about your world, where can they go?
My website, joeldavidbond.com. So it's just my full name, Joel David Bond. And it's also available on Amazon. So it's called As Large as Your Spirit, a reverse refugee memoir. Takes place during the pandemic, those first couple months of lockdown. And as I said, it has this whole overarching theme, really, of finding a place to call home.
Yeah.
It talks about real refugees versus my own sort of internal heart refugee status and trying to figure out a place to call my own.
Right on.
So pick it up where you find books on Amazon, right there, and
Yeah.
my website, joeldavidbond.com.
Excellent. This has been such a surprising treat, man. Thank you, Joel, for your time, for your story, and best of luck. Have a great 2024, man.
Excellent. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure chatting with you today.
Great talking to you. Thank you.